At 52, I felt alive again. I always knew. There was something about black men that stirred something deep inside me. Maybe it was the way they carried themselves. That quiet confidence. The rich timbre of their voices, the way their hands looked. Strong enough to build worlds and tender enough to hold a woman's heart for years. I buried that longing, tucking it away behind polite smiles and Sunday dinners. I played my role, the devoted wife, the perfect neighbor, the woman who had everything a person should ever want, but beneath it all, there was a fire. A restless ache I dared not name, not even to myself. My husband Robert was a good man. Solid, dependable, the kind of man who believed in working hard, saving money and mowing the lawn every Saturday morning like clockwork. We had a good life in our little town in Texas, the kind of life that looks perfect from the outside. Neat lawns, friendly waves, potlucks at the church hall. But at night, lying next to Robert, I often felt more like a ghost than a wife. And then, he moved in across the street into the old Miller house that had been empty for almost a year. His name was Darius Cartertall, broad-shouldered skin that gleamed like deep bronze under the Texas sun. The first time I saw him, shirtless washing his car, in the heat of a July afternoon, something inside me shifted. It was like a long-forgotten part of me. Cracked open, gasping for air, and right then I knew my life was about to change forever. If you've ever felt a hidden fire inside, a longing you thought you'd buried long ago, stay with me, because what happened next isn't just a story. It's our reminder that sometimes the life we think we've built can crumble in the blink of an eye. If you're ready for Astry that stirs your heart and challenges your soul, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. There's so much more to come the day we truly met. The heat was unforgiving. It was one of those Texas afternoons where the air feels thick enough to drink, and the sun beats down so hard you can hear the cicada scream. I had promised myself I would stay inside, but fate, or maybe something stronger, pulled me to the front porch. There he was, Darius Carter, bare-chested again, sweat glistening across his broad shoulders as he leaned over the hood of his truck, muscles flexing. With every slow, deliberate movement, I stood there for a moment, longer than I should have, watching him. I told myself it was innocent, neighborly curiosity. Nothing more, but my heart thudded wildly against my ribs, betraying me, summoning a breath I didn't realize I was holding. I walked down the steps, crossing the narrow strip of grass between our houses. "Hey there," I called, keeping my voice as light and casual as I could. He looked up, and for a moment, the world narrowed to nothing but the space between his dark eyes and mine. "Well, hello," he said, wiping his hands on a rag and giving me a slow, dangerous smile. "You must be my neighbor." His voice was deep, a rich, velvety sound that seemed to hum in the heavy air. I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, suddenly aware of how my sundress clung to my skin, damp from the heat. "Emily Parker," I said, offering my hand. He took it in, his large, warm callus, and held it just a fraction of a second longer than necessary. "Darius Carter," he said, and there was something in the way he said my name, slow, deliberate, that made the base of my spine tingle. For a moment we just stood there, locked in some unspoken understanding, the kind that says everything without a single word being uttered. I should have stepped back then. I should have made an excuse, hurried inside, locked the door. But instead, I smiled, and God helped me. I stayed after that first meeting. It was like the universe kept conspiring to throw us together everywhere I turned. There he was. Some days I found him working on his truck, his shirt peeled off, jeans riding low on his hips. Other times, he was out in the yard watering the patchy grass, sweat making his skin glisten in the harsh Texas sun. And me, I found reasons, ridiculous, flimsy excuses to be outside, watering my hydrangeas even though the ground was already soaked, checking the mailbox 3 times a day. Even when I knew it was empty, walking my old Labrador around the block, even when the heat was thick enough to choke on anything just to catch a glimpse. Sometimes it was just a nod, a half smile. Other times it was more a brush off fingers. When he handed me a dropped newspaper, a lingering glance that felt like it stripped me bare under my sundress once, as I rounded the corner of my driveway lost in thought. I nearly collided with him. Head on his hand, Scott my arms, large, firm, steadying. Me before I could stumble. Careful there, Emily, he said, his voice low, almost teasing. I looked up into his eyes, deep, dark, endless, and for one, breathless. Second, neither of us moved. His hands stayed on me a moment longer, the heat of his palms searing through the thin fabric of my blouse. I could feel my pulse thrumming in my ears, feel the flush crawling up my neck. I mumbled something I don't even remember. What? And hurried back into the house. Heart hammering, knees weak that night lying in bed next to Robert. I still felt the phantom imprint of Darius's hands. On my arm still heard the low rumble of his voice in my ear, and for the first time in years I closed my eyes and smiled. Robert had barely pulled out of the driveway when the wave of excitement washed over me. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't fear. It was hunger, the kind of hunger that had lived buried inside me for far too long. I stepped outside pretending to check the mailbox, even though there was nothing there. And there he was, Darius, bare-chested, once again, washing his truck, water dripping down the ridges of his muscles, glinting in the golden light as if he had been waiting for me. Need a hand with that? I called out, my voice catching just slightly in my throat. He looked up, that dangerous smile curling his lips. You offering? He said, tossing the sponge into the bucket and walking toward me, water still clinging to his skin. I laughed, breathless, reckless. I don't think I'd be much help, you'd be surprised. He said, his voice low, wrapping around me like velvet. You want to come in for a drink? We both knew it wasn't about the drink, but I nodded anyway. And just like that, I followed him. Inside the moment, the door clicked shut behind us. The air between us crackled thick, electric, inevitable. You've been teasing me for days, Darius murmured, stepping closer, his hands slipping into the curve of my waist as if they had always belonged there. Tell me you don't want this, he whispered against my ear. I didn't even try. Instead, I leaned into him, offering my mouth, my body, my long-starved soul. His lips crashed into mine, hot, demanding, pulling, a gasp from deep inside me. His hands roamed my body with a reverence that felt almost sacred, tracing the forgotten curves of a woman who had waited too long to be touched. Like this, I clung to him, fingers digging into his back as he lifted me effortlessly, pressing me against the wall. The world spun around as colors blurring time, dissolving into haze of heat and sensation. Every kiss, every caress, every whisper against me, skin peeled away the years of loneliness I had tried so hard to ignore, when he finally took me right there against the wall, the air heavy with the scent of sweat and longing. It wasn't just about bodies meeting. It was about souls colliding, about rediscovering parts of myself I had thought were gone forever long. After our bodies stilled, after the tremors of release faded into soft, gasping breaths, I lay in his arms, feeling more alive than I had in decades, and in the quiet that followed, one truth settled deep into my bones. There was no going back now after that first night. We couldn't stop. We didn't even try. Every chance we had, every sliver of opportunity, we took it, hungry and reckless, like two people who had been starved for too long. Sometimes it was in the shadowed corner of his living room, the blinds half closed against the scorching sun. Other times it was in my kitchen, my back pressed against the cold marble counter, his hands sliding up under my sundress. Mornings, afternoons, stolen moments in between. Errands, every encounter burned hotter than the last, leaving us both breathless and trembling. There was no shyness anymore. No hesitation. It was raw, unapologetic. Darius would find me in the hallway by the front door in the backyard and pull me into him, like a man possessed. Every kiss was a battle. We both surrendered to every touch, a spark that ignited into wildfire. The first time he took me on the stairs halfway, between the first and second floor. It was so sudden, so desperate, that I barely had time to gasp before he was lifting me, pressing me against the wall, claiming me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. We couldn't get enough of each other even when our bodies were exhausted, when our skin was slick with sweat and our muscles ached from overuse. The hunger never faded. If anything, it grew sharper, more dangerous, and through it all the thrill of secrecy wrapped around us like a second skin, the knowledge that just across the street, Robert was none the wiser, the perfect husband in the perfect house, completely unaware that his wife was losing herself, more and more. Every day I should have felt guilt. I should have felt shame. Instead, all I felt was alive, more alive than I had in my entire life. It started with a whisper, lying tangled together in the afterglow. Darius's voice slid into my ear like silk. "Why are you still with him, Emily?" he asked, tracing lazy circles along my hip. "You deserve more." I laughed weakly, brushing off the ache those words stirred inside me. "But he didn't let it go. You're wasting your life," he said. "You could have it all, the house, the money, freedom." I turned to face him, searching his eyes for a hint of a joke, but there was none. "What if?" he said, his voice low and steady. We made it happen. My heart thudded against my ribs. Fear, excitement, temptation, it was madness, immoral, unthinkable. And yet a small, wicked part of me whispered back, "Why not? The plan wasn't just about moving money around. It had to be smarter than that, subtler at first." I convinced Robert to open a joint credit card for emergencies. I made a show of responsibility, setting up automatic payments, checking balance. She trusted me completely. Then came the spending, small at first: groceries, house, repairs, then bigger boutique clothes, treatments, weekend trips to relieve my stress, always justifiable, always slipping under his radar. Darius taught me how to manipulate the statements. I diverted some bills to a P.O. box. He set up delayed payments just enough to rack up late fees. Watched the interest rates, or Robert barely noticed. Too busy, too stressed every time he voiced concern. I reassured him, offered to take care of it, made him feel guilty for not trusting me. When the first debt notices started arriving, I acted surprised, even cried. "It must be a mistake," I said, trembling hands, holding the overdue letters. "I'll fix it, I promise." Meanwhile, behind his back, Darius and I were draining the savings account transfer by transfer hidden beneath layers of paperwork and forged signatures. By the time Robert realized the mortgage was 3 months overdue, that our accounts were bleeding dry, it was too late. The damage was done. He was drowning financially, emotionally, and I stood at the edge of the water watching him sink. Robert didn't leave. Immediately at first, he tried to fight, he made frantic calls to the bank, begged for extensions, maxed out his last credit card just to cover the mortgage for. Another month I watched silently as he struggled day after day, the weight of it all crushing him from the inside out, and I played my part, perfectly supportive on the surface, quietly urging him to maybe think about a fresh start somewhere else, somewhere far from the wreckage. "You deserve peace." "Robert," I whispered one night, my hand on his arm, my voice trembling with fake emotion, "maybe it's time to let go." He resisted at first. Of course he did. But in the end, the debt, the shame, the exhaustion broke him down. One gray morning, he packed a single suitcase. "I need to go," he said, harshly, not meeting my eyes. "I can't breathe here anymore." I stood at the window as he drove away, shrinking smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror of my new life, and behind me, Darius was already waiting to claim everything we'd stolen. But paradise was never built to last, not when it was built on ruins. It started with whispers, late-night phone calls, messages he wouldn't show me, nights when he slipped out of bed claiming business that couldn't wait. First, I ignored it. I told myself it was nothing, just paranoia. But deep down, the old sharp instinct twisted. In my gut, he's hiding something. One night I followed him. My heart pounded as I trailed his truck through the dark, dusty streets of our little town. He parked behind a cheap motel. On the edge of town, I watched frozen in the shadows as he got out, and then she appeared, young, pretty, everything I used to be. She laughed as he wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close like Hughes to hold me. I saw him kiss her, deep, hungry, the same way he once kissed me, against our kitchen counter, against the walls of our stolen home. I stood there, the night air thick and suffocating, watching the man I destroyed my life for destroy me in return. And in that moment, all the lies, all the betrayals, all the blood I had spilled to build my new life came crashing down. I wasn't special. I was just another step on his way to someone better. The rage inside me burned hotter than anything I had ever felt, and I knew this wasn't over. I didn't confront him that night. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. Instead, I waited silent, watching because the house, the accounts, the papers, they were all still under my name the next morning while Darius was still asleep. I changed the locks, called the bank, cut him off from everything when he stumbled back to the door later that day, confused and furious. I met him with a cold, steady smile. "It's over, Darius." I said, "You got what you wanted, now get out." He raged to threatened, but I stood my ground because in the end he had taught me well. Trust no one, love no one, and most of all, never let anyone hold the power to destroy you. He left eventually a duffel, bag slung over his shoulder. The same smugness wiped clean from his face. I had the house, the money, my freedom. But as I stood in the silence of my victory, staring at the empty halls of the life I'd once dreamed of, I realized I had won, but I had lost everything that ever mattered. Sometimes the price of betrayal isn't just losing what you have, it's losing who you are. If this story stirred something in you, don't forget to comment your thoughts and subscribe for more real raw stories like this. There's always more to tell and more to